Yeah. Hey folks, this is Ben. This is Ben Gessel. How's it going? Sorry. I've kind of been watching a few interesting videos tonight, going down a little bit of a rabbit hole of sorts, involving. I guess it started out with, well, not really Dr. Seuss, but it kind of was talking to a gentleman who, I guess you could say, he's been studying a lot of different, well, conspiracy level, conspiracy theory type stuff. And when I mention someone like Dr. Seuss, there's that whole immediate, oh, you're talking about his books being canceled and stuff because of, well, it's funny how YouTube is like that. You look at stuff up on YouTube, one thing can lead to another. And so I was talking to this guy about some movie that I guess Dr. Seuss made. I'm not sure how much of a independent voice he had in it, but it certainly did not. It was not very. Um, uh, well, okay, how can I put this? This is for soldiers going over to Germany after World War II from the United States, and it was really pretty frosty in its tone toward the Germans. And apparently, um, General Patton hated this movie. I think it was something about, anyway. You could look it up. I didn't even know Dr. Seuss made it. Theodore Geisel. And of course, the weirder thing is that Geisel himself is German ancestry. So, and we all know Geisel is a more liberal-minded guy, at least liberal um, back then. That term nowadays, the term liberal can mean something a bit different. But Dr. Seuss, Theodore Geisel was never really one to. He certainly was not ever remotely a supporter of Nazism for sure. Hated that stuff, but and he was very pro save the environment kind of stuff, the Lorax and stuff. But again, many other aspects of his personality would seem a bit more conservative, or at the very least, uh, very distinctly German, uh, so to speak. Um, in case you're wondering about that, just listen to how his relatives viewed Jim Carrey's depiction of the Grinch, if you get my meaning. Uh, so Geisel has a lot of the old world wit and charm to him, which see. That's why I've always liked. I've always loved Dr. Seuss that way. I mean, it sounded like it was one of my own grandpas just reading me stories and stuff. And I never, his liberalism was very refreshing. It was never a obnoxious kind of liberalism. So it makes sense to me that he detested racism, of course, and so he probably detested it so much that he made this movie. But some of what he was saying again in this movie, which again, I want to jump thinking a little bit more. I want to jump into more a little bit more deep stuff here in a bit, um, but he must have. He probably had his rhyme and reasons to what he was doing, and it goes without saying that the United States Americans wanted Hitler out of power. Um, it was probably something though that was a little bit more of a debated thing, somewhat than we might realize. But um, probably the biggest, and none of us were alive. I mean, who was alive back then at this point? It would have been the 30s and 40s. I mean, uh, whoever is still alive would be really stinking old right now. They'd be, yeah, old folks' homes. But anyway, but I imagine that if there was any debate or any talk about, there's probably a lot of stuff going on. It was probably in World War II. It's probably if you're talking about Americans, specifically not just white Americans, but especially if you're talking about white America, white, you probably have a lot of discussions about democracy. You have the pro democracy Americans that want to help the Jews, and versus some of the folks that were more sympathetic toward Nazism and white supremacy, or at least Nordic supremacy. And so that was probably a hot topic, uh, more so than many of us might realize. Um, I suppose you could substitute the term Anglo-Saxon for Nordic, but you get the idea. A lot of folks probably just wanted there to be more uh, white people and blondes in particular in the world. And by the way, that whole train of thought is one that's shared by many other folks that were definitely not Nazis, but because whenever someone espouses that view, that there should be more Anglo-Saxon or Nordic or any Europeans for the most part, really, but especially Europeans north of the Alps, and especially Saxon type folks, and those related to Saxon, English and Germans, but and probably Danes too. It just when you hear that kind of rhetoric, it suggests Nazism, of course, but it may suggest other things, and that's just one of the reasons why Benjamin Franklin is oftentimes maligned, as well as many other people, our founding fathers. And this kind of leads into a little bit of what I wanted to talk about here. And by the way, I don't think anything worse of Dr. Seuss. I think it's just that that was a time when emotions were running high, and we just wanted Hitler out of power. We wanted him ousted. And yeah. And so people were saying a lot of crazy things about Germans in particular, calling them Huns, which I think the Huns probably don't like that term at all because they kind of disparaged. It was always disparaging to the Huns because they're actually the real Huns. The Germans are not Huns, but they're, yeah, anyway, you get the idea, right? This is old World War II things. Showing the square-jawed German guy looking at you with his blue eyes and just, yeah, you get enough of that from Spielberg sometimes. Yeah. So, okay. Indiana Jones. All right. So, yeah. There are some folks I talked about in the past in my channel, such as Walt Disney, just many others. We can even include members of my church here. In some respects, we're talking about, yeah, with this train of thought I have, we're talking about mostly white European men. We're talking about a lot of people that have been Masons. It seems to me like there are still a lot of misunderstandings about certain subjects, and there probably always will be until at some point there isn't. What am I talking about here? I'm talking about a lot of mysterious stuff. I'm talking a lot about secrety stuff. Which, of course, as you guys can probably guess, I don't understand most of what I'm talking about. But at the other hand, I actually do understand quite a bit of things. It's all relative. See, you think you understand a lot about a subject until you really start going deeper and deeper and deeper. Like, oh man, I don't really know a thing about the subject. I thought I did, right? Then you think you know more once you've read all this other stuff, and and some subjects are like that, and other subjects are not. What subjects can you just keep studying and studying and studying your entire life, keep getting more and more knowledgeable about it? But well, that's most things in life. Most things are like that. What is not like that? Well, the obvious thing we talk about is what do you need to do to go to heaven? Again, well, it's developing righteous character and faith, repentance, baptism. This is religion. This is the core of religious stuff, right? That thing is definitely something that is not a intellectually complex thing. It is it's our spiritual battle, in this life. So that's a very different kind of thing than these other subjects that we might be very interested in. And there's always these spiritual crossovers. Anything that's of real importance, I think, to us, on some level, is spiritual. It has to be, if it has any importance to us, because the spiritual realm is connected with everything. It's our emotions, it's relationships, it's aesthetics, it's everything. Okay. So I mentioned, as you guys know, I have pretty conservative views, but they're independent. I hate the establishment. I believe the Illuminati exists. Call it what you want. I'm a very much independent conservative. I'm often very much in agreement with Southern Baptists, for instance, and of course, members of my own church, Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I mentioned all this before. Many other people, Catholics, Jews, Muslims. It doesn't really matter what your religion is. There's all kinds of people that I agree with about all kinds of stuff. Even many liberals. At the end of the day, I hate establishment. I hate the CIA. I hate. All these I should say. I very, very, very. I mistrust the CIA. I mistrust so many people, and there are people I know that are honorable people in office, and they're honorable. It's good that they're in office, but no, I just, Anyway, we tried to drain the swamp with Trump. Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know. Say what you want about that. So, okay. The stuff about Disney, and I'm sure on some little Dr. Seuss, and heck, I mean, there's other animators that would probably come into this whole thing. And a psychologist I've been reading about, uh, Dr. Cameron, doing these mind control experience, MK Ultra stuff, and there's a whole bunch of other folks that the whole Masonic thing, right? The 33rd degree Scottish, right, Freemasons, and Albert Pike, and witchcraft, and Brigham Young's grandma or something being a witch, all the stuff that you hear about Joseph Smith, Masons and stuff. I've heard a lot of this stuff before. This is all pretty familiar territory to me. It's not just that the Masons, for instance, are all white. They're not all white, but in the past, they were definitely very much white men that were pretty either wealthy or they were very influential. And, there's a lot of questions about not just the Masons, but there's a lot of questions about. I've had all kinds of thoughts, of course, about the Nazis' interest in the occult and Eastern stuff. There's all that interest in witchcraft, or I should say, seances. In the 1800s, turn of the century, all this kind of is all interrelated. It's all connected somehow. Or you can go. It's like a big rabbit. It's like a huge rabbit holes, right? You can go from one subject to the other so easily. This is. I was talking to my mom, for instance, about Alice in Wonderland, and I know I'm just going everywhere with it. It's all connected. It's all related somehow. Talk about Charles Ludwig Dodgson's very bright mind, math, and his whimsical thing about how he wrote Alice in Wonderland. Very what's what I'm looking for? Well, just his very unorthodox approach to writing fiction books, right? Um, in some ways, it's still fascinating, right? The subconscious is still so fascinating. It's I love writing music that gets into subconscious stuff. The more I get in the subconscious of my writing, the better sometimes I think my music is. But it's just that I wanted to say that there's still many things about all this stuff that I'm still figuring out on my own. But there are a few things that I hold to be true still. The first thing that I'm just going to say right off the bat is that, and this is Walt Disney, Reagan, like Ronald Reagan, and many, many, many others, right? Just because somebody went to the Bohemian Grove, just because somebody was in Walt Disney's elite restaurant. Just because, you know, even somebody's a 33rd degree Scottish Freemason, or someone made some comment in the past, Benjamin Franklin talking about the supremacy of Saxons and stuff, English Saxons in particular, on and on and on, right? It doesn't make somebody a bad person. It doesn't. I've talked before about this racist thing before, right? It was a different time before the Civil Rights era. It's a different time. People thought differently back then. They did. You're going to be hard pressed to find people that didn't make caricatures of Asians and black folks back then. That's how things were back then. That's how American society was. I've mentioned that before. It's kind of an old hat. But what I wanted to mention is that there's a number of subjects that are all, you're going down these different rabbit holes with Masons and Walt Disney and wherever you want to go. You can just keep going and going and going and going. The thing that I'm not talking about here is that there are a lot of, I would say, very righteous people in the past that have kind of, some of them have kind of explored these different, more unconventional, or kind of, if you really want to, explore this path, what's going on here, these different subjects. I mentioned Brigham Young's grandma being a witch, something like that. There are some very righteous people that have had some very, very intelligent, whatever, that has very intelligent relatives. That when somebody has high intelligence and they're very, more especially naturally curious about a number of subjects, and I'm like this myself. I'm very attracted to mysterious subjects and things that are tough, to really know for sure what's going on, but yet they still have a lot of interest, right? There's an allure for a number of subjects for me. I'll be this way till the day I die, right? There's an allure about a number of subjects. I know what they are. You guys probably know what they are as well. It goes far beyond music and music composition. This is, the meanings of different colors in art, just visual stuff, and harmony, and and the nature of existence, and numerology, and astronomy. Not astrology, but astronomy. But I know that you have guys like Earth, Wind, and Fire. Maurice White was really into astrology, and so But that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's things like all the things the Masons did, the similarities between Masons and my church in some respects. Oh, the symbolism, the ceremonies, the colors, the ranks and stuff, and it's all very interesting. And sure, I mentioned before how much I despise the snobbery and the hierarchy in Europe regarding these different rankings and colors and things. But on the other hand, it's also very interesting, But it's like, so much of the time we feel like we're talking about here is the good old boys club on some level, or it's the Illuminati, or it's the what we don't like about the Catholic Church, or some of it, or whatever it is. It's the establishment, but maybe it's the European establishment we're talking about. And with and then I get easily into the Illuminati, Bohemian Grove stuff. It's it's hard to separate one subject from the other in my mind, but there are many other subjects like this that I suppose I'll always be researching on some level. And what I wanted to say, at least in this video, is that I continue to hold Walt Disney up in high regard. But without getting into all the race stuff, right? Because If I haven't mentioned some things in the past, I will in the future again. I was going to say this. Many great men, whether they're righteous, very right, they could be very godly men, very righteous men, very disciplined and that sort of thing, very pure mind, soul. But there's those guys, and then there's the very intelligent folks, and sometimes they're both intelligent, righteous, very naturally curious, very insightful, whatever. And one of the facts of this life is, you when you're talking about composers and scientists and philosophers and artists and so on and so forth, whenever you create something truly original and new, or even if it's similar to something else that's already existed, but it has its own kind of beauty, whatever has its own kind of beauty, that's there's something real there, something very good that was made, and it should be valued highly. And um, the process by which you come to create something like this takes many, many forms. But it often involves some deep soul searching, depending what it is that someone's doing. There are some things that are insanely difficult to do, and or again, more spiritually demanding in nature, maybe more emotionally demanding in nature, maybe more intellectually demanding in nature, maybe something a little different physically. Just you're thinking like huge symphonies that you're writing up, or whatever it is. Philosophies that are difficult to pin down. I am talking about all these very esoteric things that are often very subjective. But I'm talking about the arts and sciences. I'm talking about things of the mind. I'm talking about even things that some folks would say are in the realm of, as Joel Wendt would describe it. He's talking about anthroposophy and dark magic and holy magic and magic proper. But these are things of the mind. These are things that are often unseen. And even whether or not you want to get into that other stuff, right? Which again, it's just one of those things I watch on occasion. It's like, oh, there's so many interesting things that way. But even though I'm like, oh, magic is evil, and a lot of folks are more inclined to go with a different route of thinking about this whole thing. But yeah, this also connects with all this stuff. And I guess as you're probably picking up here, I have a rather open mind about a lot of things still. At least I try to have an open enough mind to be able to accept new things as being true. And I keep trying to make my point here. You cannot have a truly great person in life who hasn't taken leaps of faith about some things. Who hasn't, you have people that have to be scared, have to take some leaps of faith again. You have to try hard things, do really hard things in order to be remembered. In order to be somebody people remember as being this is a great man, this is a great woman. It takes guts sometimes. It takes real courage. It takes initiative. It takes fortitude. It takes tenacity. It takes never giving up. And some of these people I'm talking about here, and there's somebody else I've been watching about stuff about music composition. It's also very controversial. The LaRouche, I'm not sure what exactly it is, but they're praising Beethoven, Mozart, and many other more tonal composers, and they're very much, um, it's a little bit anti-avant-garde type, if you get my meaning, but uh, I understand what they're saying. It's very interesting, but it's just, um, I've often felt, by the way, that avant-garde music tends to pull the soul down, and more tonal music it tends to build the soul. And these are the kinds of things, again, you can't say. It's a very subjective thing to say. And people will want to argue till they're dead about this stuff. There's a reason why that stuff is still discussed. Why it's still, just like color theory, just like or feng shui, just like the Masons and all their interesting things they do. Why are we drawn to this stuff? Why do we keep being drawn to numerology? Why is shapes and things? It's because there's something real behind all this stuff. There's real truth, and it's fascinating for us because it's like hidden truths. It's so fun. The pursuit of all this stuff is so enjoyable. It brings more meaning to life. And I know I keep hearing this every Sunday. It's like, but the most important things are still the things that are going to result in you being able to, the best chance of you being able to, go to heaven at some point, right? Developing habits that are celestial. And, accepting the Lord's grace and all that stuff. Yep. Yes, but so I'm still going to defend Disney, but I cannot say, I'm talking about so many of these guys. These are still imperfect men. These are still guys that have, some people would think, some very major flaws, but what can I say? I mean, it's much more enjoyable for me. It's a much more enjoyable thing to just be immersed in certain psyches that are not necessarily always well, when you watch a Disney movie from the past and you really feel like you are immersed in Walt Disney's imagination or the Disney imagination, it's a great feeling. You don't always feel the same way that you would feel if you watched, I don't know, Legacy. It's one of my church's movies made about the pioneers. You're going to feel a certain way about Legacy. That's going to be a little different than if you watch Alice in Wonderland, Disney's Alice. I'm not saying that it's just a different feeling, and or Snow White, or I don't know, Sleeping Beauty, Disney's Sleeping Beauty. It's just Fantasia. You could look for all the Masonic stuff. You could look for all the Illuminati stuff. You could, and as I mentioned before, the people that go to the Bohemian Grove, I think, were not necessarily bad men. They're just part of the establishment, or they were maybe some of the nicer folks in the establishment. Because folks in the establishment know that you need to have everybody who's influential at some level as part of the group, because they want to hide the real scumbags who are doing all the scumbaggy stuff. It's one of those things where if you've got lots of money and you are a big name, then you're going to be more likely to be invited into the club on some level at least. You might never know about the true scumbags, and that's how it was for all these guys. A lot of these guys. So you see pictures of Nixon and Reagan, and oh, they're so bad. No, they were in the Bohemian Grove. No, that doesn't mean they were scumbags. Although I've heard some kind of bad things about Nixon, and many others were there, not just Republicans. There's a lot of you get going on these rabbit holes on YouTube. It's so fun, but So I will still defend most of these men as being respectable men that I truly love. But I also accept the fact that there's probably some dark things in there as well. A lot of great men, a lot of very memorable men and women, do have some dark sides to them. And maybe they didn't fully rid themselves of those darker sides in this life. And so, here we are, that they're dead, we're alive. Are we going to judge them to death, or are we going to just try to forgive them and learn from them and do better and hope that they do better in the next life? I mean, there's really no point to holding grudges against people that are dead. because they're dead. What you can do is you can leave judgment in God's hands and try to be happy. All right, you guys leave your thoughts and comments below. Catch you later. Take care. Bye.